The galaxy had known war before, but nothing like this. For centuries, alien civilizations waged conflicts with fleets of elegant starships, plasma cannons, and highly coordinated strategies. Empires clashed over resources, trade routes, and territorial disputes. But warfare always followed a set of rules, unspoken agreements that kept battles contained. Even the most brutal species understood restraint, knowing that total annihilation meant no victors, only extinction. Then, humanity arrived. At first, they seemed insignificant, a late-blooming race that had just achieved interstellar travel, barely scratching the surface of the galactic stage. The older empires saw them as primitive, unpredictable, and above all, weak. Their ships lacked the fluid designs of the Elendari. Their weapons were far cruder than the precise energy lances of the Xephos Dominion. Their tactics? Chaotic, unrefined. But there was something different about humanity, something the galaxy had failed to understand before it was too late. Humans did not fight to win battles. They fought to win wars. And when the warship Hell's Wrath emerged from hyperspace, the galaxy realized its worst nightmare had just begun. The Galactic War and humanity's unforgiving response. The conflict that led to humanity's full-scale military deployment started as a minor skirmish, one the greater civilizations hardly noticed. A border dispute between the Taurai hierarchy and the Zalith Consortium had escalated into an open war, dragging several allied species into the chaos. Humanity, a minor participant in the Galactic Alliance, had sent a few diplomats to mediate, but no one took them seriously. That changed when the Taurai hierarchy violated an unspoken law of war. They attacked a human colony. New Albion, a small outpost on the fringes of explored space, was supposed to be neutral territory. It had no military significance, no strategic value. Just a fledgling human settlement with a few million civilians trying to establish a foothold beyond Sol. The Taurai, desperate for a quick victory, launched a warning strike to deter human involvement, a mistake of cosmic proportions. They didn't just attack military installations. They razed the colony. Cities burned. Transmission signals were filled with screams. The footage that survived showed Taurai warships glassing entire regions, reducing millions of human lives to dust. The galactic community, despite their disgust, prepared to move on. This was war, after all. Collateral damage was expected, but humanity did not move on. They did not send diplomats. They did not ask for negotiations. They did not demand reparations. They sent Hell's Wrath, the warship that changed everything. Most galactic warships were designed for precision. Fast, maneuverable, and efficient, built to disable enemies and force surrenders. Hell's Wrath was none of these things. It was a relic of an older time, an experiment that had been deemed too extreme by humanity's own strategists. A planet killer, designed during the early days of human expansion, when they feared existential threats from unknown alien predators. It had been locked away in the depths of Sol's military archives, until now. The ship was massive, a floating fortress bristling with weapons that should have never been used. Kinetic rods the size of skyscrapers, capable of turning entire continents into craters. Fusion warheads that could set atmospheres ablaze. Railguns that fired at near-light speeds, capable of obliterating fleets before they even realized they were under attack. And its most terrifying weapon, the Hellfire Barrage. This was not a surgical warship. It was destruction incarnate. When it arrived at the Taurai homeworld, the hierarchy's admirals laughed. A single ship? Against an armada? They believed humanity had sent a symbolic show of force, a desperate attempt to demand justice. Then Hell's Wrath opened fire, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Taurai fleet was one of the most advanced in the galaxy, a force that had crushed countless civilizations in their brutal expansions. Their ships gleamed under the twin suns of their home system, sleek and elegant, equipped with the latest in energy shielding and plasma-based weaponry. They had spent centuries perfecting the art of war, but nothing had prepared them for Hell's Wrath. The warship did not open communications. It did not demand surrender. It did not even acknowledge the enemy. It simply began its work. The first barrage came from the railguns, long metal rods, accelerated to near-light speeds. Unlike plasma or laser weapons, these projectiles didn't care about shields. They punched through hulls, shattered reactors, and turned warships into silent wrecks drifting in the void. The Tauri, commanders, still believing this was a conventional battle, ordered a full counterattack. It was the last order many of them would ever give. The Tauri fleet fired thousands of plasma bolts, lances of superheated energy that had annihilated entire armadas before. But Hell's Wrath was different. It didn't rely on shields or evasive maneuvers. It didn't need to. Its hull, reinforced with layers of tungsten carbide and electromagnetic armor, absorbed the first volley like a predator, shaking off raindrops. Then, it retaliated. The Hellfire barrage erupted from the warship's side cannons, sending waves of incendiary munitions into the heart of the enemy formation. Unlike conventional explosives, these warheads did not merely explode. They ignited everything. Atmospheres inside ships burst into flames, turning entire crews into living torches. Oxygen lines ruptured, fires spread through corridors, and within minutes, thousands of Tauri officers were burning inside their own vessels. Panic set in. The enemy's proud formations crumbled. Some ships attempted to flee, only to be hunted down by swarms of self-guided kinetic missiles, each one designed to lock onto heat signatures and chase them to the ends of space. Others tried to surrender, broadcasting distress signals, but humanity wasn't listening. For the first time, in recorded galactic history, a battle lasted less than an hour. The Tauri home defense fleet, 200 warships, the pride of their empire, ceased to exist. But Hell's Wrath was not finished. Planetary devastation. A warning to the galaxy. With the enemy fleet destroyed, nothing stood between the warship and Taurus Prime, the capital of the Tauri hierarchy. The planet was a sprawling metropolis, home to over 20 billion individuals. Political leaders, military officials, civilians, none of them had ever imagined their world would be touched by war. They had assumed that battle was something that happened on distant colonies, far from their shining cities. Then, the orbital bombardment began. Hell's Wrath deployed its kinetic bombardment payloads, unleashing a weapon that made traditional explosives seem like firecrackers. The rods, often called God's spears, fell from the sky at terminal velocity, striking the surface with the force of nuclear detonations, but without the radiation. Skyscrapers vanished in blinding flashes. Entire districts disappeared, under rolling mushroom clouds of dust and debris. The planet's oceans boiled as targeted strikes hit coastal cities, sending tsunamis surging inward. The Tauri government, desperate to survive, activated its deep planetary bunkers, hoping to wait out the destruction. Hell's Wrath anticipated this. The ship's final attack was the Atmosphere Scrambler. A classified human weapon, it released a dense field of ionized particles into the stratosphere, destabilizing weather patterns and triggering planet-wide superstorms. Within hours, hurricane-force winds tore through cities, acid rain scorched entire regions, and electrical storms ignited uncontrolled fires. By the time the bombardment ceased, Taurus Prime was unrecognizable. The once great capital of the Tauri hierarchy had been reduced to a burning, storm-racked wasteland, and above it all, Hell's Wrath hovered in silence, its work complete. The message to the galaxy. The few survivors of the Tauri hierarchy, what remained of its government and military, broadcasted a desperate plea to the galaxy. They had believed themselves untouchable, an empire that could wage war without consequence. Now, they were begging for mercy, and humanity answered. A single transmission was sent out from the warship. 3 words: never again. Warned. No declaration of war, no political statement. Just a cold, brutal reminder of what happened when humanity was provoked. The galactic community watched in horror. Empires that had once mocked humanity as a backwater. Species re-evaluated their stance. The powerful Xiphos Dominion, the Elandari High Council, even the dreaded Archeon Lords, all of them suddenly realized that humanity was not just another species to be exploited or dismissed. Humanity had something no other race did. They didn't fight for honor, for conquest, or even for survival. They fought for vengeance, and when they did, they left nothing behind. The destruction of Taurus Prime was not just an act of war. It was a message carved into the fabric of galactic history. The sheer brutality of the attack sent shockwaves through the cosmos, reaching the furthest corners of every empire, every federation, every pirate haven. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt fear. Not the kind bred from political tension or economic competition, but a raw, primal terror, the kind that made entire species question their survival. The Tauri hierarchy, once an empire, that had thrived on war, ceased to exist overnight. Their remaining territories fell into chaos, with rebel factions overthrowing what was left of their leadership. Other species that had allied with them, even indirectly, publicly denounced their actions, not out of morality, but out of sheer terror that they would be next. But the real consequences of Hell's wrath were far greater than the fall of one empire. The galactic powers' response. In the days that followed, a universal emergency summit was called. Every major interstellar power, rivals, sworn enemies, even ancient species that had remained neutral for centuries, gathered in the halls of the Galactic Concordance. Their agenda? How to deal with humanity. For years, humanity had been an afterthought, a minor player with no real influence. But now they were something far worse, an uncontrollable variable in an otherwise stable galactic order. The Xiphos Dominion, a species known for its calculated ruthlessness, suggested immediate containment measures. They proposed an intergalactic blockade, a strategic effort to ensure that humanity's military technology could never be used against another species again. The Elendari High Council, one of the oldest races in the galaxy, took a different approach. They advocated for diplomacy, urging the galaxy not to repeat the mistakes of the Tauri. Humanity, they argued, had only retaliated and had shown no interest in further conquest. The destruction of Taurus Prime was not a declaration of war, but a warning, but not everyone saw it that way. The Archeon Lords, a warlike species that had ruled entire quadrants through sheer military might, refused to be intimidated. To them, humanity's actions were not a warning, but a challenge. If war was what the humans wanted, then war was what they would get. The summit lasted for weeks, filled with arguments, secret negotiations, and threats of new alliances forming, in response to the new human threat. But before any decision could be made, humanity acted first. Humanity's unprecedented move. Unlike every other species, humanity did not gloat. They did not demand reparations or new territories. Instead, they did something no one expected. They recalled Hell's wrath. The warship that had single-handedly obliterated an empire simply vanished from known space, returning to its place in humanity's military archives. No further attacks followed, no invasions, no ultimatums. Humanity, it seemed, had no interest in conquest. But the galaxy had already changed. The Elendari High Council's fears were confirmed. Humanity did not fight for resources or power. They had unleashed their wrath not for expansion, but for revenge. And that made them infinitely more dangerous than any war-hungry empire, because a species that fights for survival can be reasoned with. A species that fights for vengeance cannot. The silent fear that followed. For years after the fall of Tauri Prime, the galaxy remained in a fragile, uneasy peace. Not because of treaties, not because of diplomacy, but because no one wanted to be next. No empire dared to provoke humanity again. Trade agreements were suddenly renegotiated in humanity's favor. Border disputes were settled before they could escalate. Even pirate fleets, once bold enough to raid human shipping lanes, began to avoid human space altogether. And yet, despite all of this, humanity never spoke of Hell's wrath again. They simply carried on, building, exploring, expanding. The warship itself? Locked away, its coordinates unknown. Some believed it had been dismantled, buried under layers of secrecy. Others whispered that it still waited in the void, dormant, a sleeping god that would awaken only when called upon. But one fact remained indisputable. No one would ever look at humanity the same way again. Because now, they knew the truth. Humanity did not seek war. But if war came to them, if they were provoked, if they were wronged, they would end it. Not with treaties, not with negotiations,